I knew something was wrong the second I logged into my bank account. My stomach dropped as I stared at the screen, the numbers blurring before my eyes. 3 charges I didn't recognize. One to $49 at Nordstrom, $8 to $79 at Apple, and $2,340 at some jewelry store I'd never heard of. What the actual fuck? I whispered to my empty apartment. I blinked hard, hoping the transactions would disappear. They didn't. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the rest of my statement, finding 5 more charges I hadn't made. Over $7,000 gone in 2 days. I called the bank immediately, my voice shaking as I explained the situation to the representative. She asked me the standard questions. Do you still have your card? Has anyone had access to your personal information recently? Yes, I have my card, I said, pulling it from my wallet to confirm. And no, I don't think... I stopped mid-sentence as a terrible thought crossed my mind. Zoe, last weekend, my apartment. We'd had wine while watching movies. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, and she'd stayed over. She knew where I kept important documents. She knew my habits, my passwords, everything. We'd been best friends for 12 years. Ma'am, are you still there? Yes, sorry, I said, my mouth suddenly dry. I need to check something. Can I call you back? I hung up and immediately texted Zoe. Need to talk. Emergency. Call me ASAP. While waiting, I paced my living room trying to calm my racing heart. This couldn't be happening. Not Zoe. There had to be another explanation. My phone buzzed with a text. In a meeting. What's up? I typed back. Someone used my credit card. $7,000 gone. Need to talk now. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, that's terrible. Call the bank? The casual response made my skin prickle. No shock, no outrage, no offer to call me right away. I called her, straight to voicemail. Fuck. I threw my phone onto the couch and collapsed beside it, my head in my hands. I needed proof before I accused my best friend of stealing from me. I opened my laptop and logged into my email, searching for the credit card alerts I'd ignored yesterday. There they were, purchase confirmations sent directly to my email. I checked the IP address information in the email headers. The purchases were made from a location in Bellevue, where Zoe lived. My phone rang. Susan from work. Hey, Kaya, she said when I answered. Are you okay? You never miss team meetings. The meeting, I'd completely forgotten. I'm sorry, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm dealing with something personal. Anything I can help with? I hesitated. Susan was a friend, but not someone I usually shared personal problems with. My credit card was stolen, I said finally. Someone charged thousands of dollars. That's awful. Do you know who did it? I have a suspicion, I said carefully, but I need to be sure before I do anything. Well, let me know if you need anything. The team misses you. After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the wall. The betrayal felt physical, like a knife between my ribs. 12 years of friendship. Countless secrets shared. Holidays spent together when neither of us could go home. Zoe had held me when I cried through my divorce from Heath last year. Heath. I grabbed my phone and opened Instagram. I hadn't checked his profile in months, part of my healing process. His most recent post was from 3 days ago, a sunset photo at a restaurant I didn't recognize. I scrolled through the comments. Beautiful view, babe. Can't wait for tomorrow. The comment was from Zoe, posted 2 days ago. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I clicked on Zoe's profile, which showed no recent activity. She was always careful about what she posted, but her tagged photos told a different story. There she was, in a photo posted by a mutual friend last week. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, Zoe and Heath, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. The room spun around me, my best friend and my ex-husband, the two people I had trusted most in the world. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bitter bile. Leaning against the cold tile wall, I tried to breathe through the panic and betrayal crushing my chest. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Sorry, crazy day. Dinner tonight? We can talk about your card issue." I stared at her message, rage replacing shock. She wanted to have dinner? Act normal? After stealing my money and sleeping with my ex? I stood up, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my face pale, but something else was there too, a hardness I hadn't seen before. "Enough," I whispered to my reflection. I texted back, "Perfect. Your place at 7. I'll bring wine." Tonight, I would look her in the eye. Tonight, I would hear her admit what she'd done, and then I would decide exactly how to make her pay. I spent the afternoon in a fog of rage, methodically gathering evidence, screenshots of the credit card charges, copies of the email confirmations, photos from social media showing Zoe and Heath together. I organized everything in a folder on my phone, ready to confront her with proof she couldn't deny. By 6:30, I was parked outside Zoe's condo building, rehearsing what I would say. The bottle of wine sat in the passenger seat, her favorite Cabernet that we'd discovered together on a weekend trip to Napa 3 years ago, back when I thought I knew who she was. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, about to confront the person who stole my card. "Wish me luck." Her response came quickly. "Be careful. Want me to call in 30 mins with an emergency if you need an exit?" I smiled despite everything. "Yes, please. Thanks." At exactly 7, I knocked on Zoe's door, my heart hammering against my ribs. She opened it wearing an outfit I'd never seen before, a silky emerald blouse that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, probably bought with my money. "Kaya!" She hugged me like nothing was wrong. "Come in. I ordered Thai food." Her apartment looked different. New artwork on the walls, a designer lamp I recognized from a store we'd browsed together last month. I'd commented on loving it, but couldn't justify the $600 price tag. "Love what you've done with the place," I said, my voice carefully neutral as I handed her the wine. "Oh, thanks," she beamed, taking the bottle. "Just a few little upgrades. Life's too short not to surround yourself with beautiful things, right?" I nodded, swallowing the acid rising in my throat. "Right." We moved to her kitchen where she opened the wine and poured 2 glasses. The familiar routine felt surreal now, like watching actors perform a play about our friendship. "So tell me about this credit card nightmare," she said, leaning against her new marble countertop. "Did you call the bank?" I took a sip of wine, watching her over the rim of my glass. "I did. They're investigating." "Good. Any idea who did it?" The audacity nearly took my breath away. I set my glass down carefully. "Actually, yes." I pulled out my phone. The purchases were made from an IP address in Bellevue, specifically from this neighborhood. Her expression flickered, just for a second, before she composed herself. "That's crazy. Maybe someone was using public Wi-Fi nearby?" Maybe. I scrolled through my phone. But then I noticed something else interesting. The items purchased? They're things I've seen recently. I turned my phone toward her, showing a receipt for the lamp currently illuminating her living room. Her face paled. "Kaya, I can explain." "Can you also explain this?" I swiped to the photo of her with Heath. "Or were you planning to tell me about that too?" She set her wine glass down hard, red liquid sloshing onto the counter. "You're spying on me now?" "Spying? It was on Instagram, Zoe. You didn't even try to hide it." "Heath and it just happened." She crossed her arms defensively. "After you two split up, We've been divorced for 10 months, I cut in. How long have you been seeing him? She looked away. 8 months. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 8. You were consoling me about my divorce while secretly dating him? It wasn't like that. Her voice rose. You were so wrapped up in your own misery you couldn't see anything else. Do you know what it's like being your friend? Always in your shadow, always the sidekick? I stared at her, speechless. You had everything, she continued, her words tumbling out faster. The perfect job, the perfect husband, the perfect life, and you took it all for granted. So you stole from me? Started sleeping with my ex-husband behind my back? That's your justification? I borrowed the money, she said, her voice smaller now. I was going to pay you back. With what? Heath's money? The pieces suddenly connected. Is that why you're with him? For his money? Her expression hardened. Don't act so superior. You married him for the same reason. I married him because I loved him. And look how that turned out. She smirked. He wasn't happy with you, Kaya. He is with me. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my phone and started forwarding the evidence to myself, to Susan, to the police department's fraud email. What are you doing? Alarm crept into her voice. Ensuring you can't delete this evidence. I looked up at her. You're going to return everything you bought with my money, or I'm pressing charges. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Go ahead. It's your word against mine. Who do you think people will believe? The bitter divorcee or the woman who's finally happy? My phone rang. Susan's promised emergency call. I ignored it. You know what your problem is, Zoe? You think you won, but you just showed me exactly who you are. I picked up my purse. Keep the stuff. Keep Heath. It'll cost me less in the long run than keeping you in my life ever did. Her face contorted with anger. You think you're so much better than me? You have no idea what I'm capable of. I paused at the door. Actually, that's the one thing I finally understand perfectly. Walking to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photo of Heath and Zoe at what looked like a party, champagne glasses raised in a toast. The caption made my blood freeze. Celebrating our engagement. Can't wait to tell the world. I leaned against my car, my legs suddenly weak. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war, and I was woefully unprepared. I didn't sleep that night. The engagement photo haunted me. Their smiling faces, the diamond ring visible on Zoe's finger. My ring. The one Heath had given me 4 years ago. The one I'd returned during our divorce settlement. By morning, I'd moved from shock to calculation. I needed help from someone who understood the digital world better than I did. Someone who could help me figure out exactly what Zoe had access to and how to protect myself from whatever she was planning next. I texted Vada, my old college roommate who now worked in cybersecurity. Need your expertise. Personal emergency. Can we meet today? Her response came within minutes. Coffee at Analog on 5th, noon. I spent the morning at the bank, closing accounts and opening new ones. The fraud department representative looked at me with pity when I explained that my best friend had stolen my card information. Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing all the time, she said. The people closest to us often have the easiest access. By noon, I was sitting across from Vada in the back corner of the coffee shop. She hadn't changed much since college. Still rocked the undercut hairstyle, still wore all black, still had that intense gaze that made you feel like she could see right through you. You look like shit, she said by way of greeting. Thanks, it's been a rough couple of days. I explained everything, the credit card theft, Zoe and Heath's relationship, the engagement announcement. Vada listened without interrupting, occasionally typing notes on her laptop. When I finished, she pushed her glasses up her nose and leaned forward. First, we need to figure out exactly what she has access to: email accounts, social media, banking, cloud storage, everything. Then we change all passwords and set up two-factor authentication. She paused. But that's just defense. What do you actually want to do about this? I hesitated. I want justice. I want her to face consequences. Legal consequences or personal ones? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Do you want to press charges for the fraud, which might be difficult to prove without a confession? Or do you want to expose her to your social circle? Or do you want something else entirely? Her eyes narrowed. I need to know where the line is, Kaya. I stared into my coffee. I don't know yet, but I need information first. I need to know what else she's been doing, what else she's planning. Vada nodded. That I can help with. Let's start with a deep dive on her digital footprint. For the next hour, she showed me how to secure my accounts and helped me set up monitoring for any suspicious activity. Then she started digging into Zoe's online presence. She's careful, Vada muttered, scrolling through data. Private accounts, minimal digital trail, but everyone leaves traces. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Hey, everything okay? You seemed upset yesterday. I'd forgotten to follow up with her after her emergency call. I typed back, not really. Zoe stole my credit card info and is engaged to Heath. 3 dots appeared immediately, then, what? Coming over tonight. No arguments. Wine and takeout on me. I smiled weakly. At least I still had one friend I could trust. Found something, Vada said suddenly. Zoe's been searching for information on your parents. My head snapped up. My parents? Why? Hard to say, but she's looked up property records for their house, your dad's retirement information, and your mom's medical history. A cold feeling spread through my chest. My mom's medical history? How is that even possible? If she had access to your accounts, she might have found medical proxy information or insurance details. Vada looked troubled. When did you last talk to your parents? Last week. They're in Arizona for the winter. I pulled out my phone and called my mom, trying to keep my voice casual as I asked if anyone had contacted them recently. Actually, yes, Mom said. Zoe called yesterday. She was so sweet checking in on my arthritis. She mentioned you've been under a lot of stress at work and might not be thinking clearly. My hand tightened around the phone. What else did she say? Just that we shouldn't worry if you say anything unusual. She said you've been working too hard and having some episodes. The manipulation was so calculated it made me dizzy. Mom, listen to me. Zoe and I aren't friends anymore. She stole from me. Don't share any information with her, okay? Silence then. Honey, are you sure you're all right? Zoe said you might say something like this. I'm fine, Mom. I promise. Just be careful with Zoe. After hanging up, I looked at Vada, my hands shaking. She's trying to isolate me, make people think I'm unstable. Vada's expression darkened. Classic gaslighting. She's getting ahead of you, controlling the narrative. What do I do? You need leverage. Vada turned her laptop toward me. And I think I found some. 3 years ago, Zoe worked at Meridian Financial. She left suddenly, no explanation. But I found forum posts from that time suggesting an employee was fired for accessing client information inappropriately. You think that was Zoe? Worth investigating. If she has a history of this behavior, it changes everything. Vada closed her laptop. But Kaya, be careful. This isn't just about credit card fraud anymore. She's actively trying to undermine your credibility. I nodded, a new determination settling over me. I need to talk to someone from Meridian. I can help with that too. Vada pulled out her phone. My client list includes people from most major financial institutions in the city. As she scrolled through contacts, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't just fighting to recover what I'd lost. I was fighting for my reputation, my relationships, my future. And for the first time since this began, I understood that playing defense wasn't enough. To beat Zoe at her own game, I needed to become something I'd never been before. A hunter. Susan arrived at my apartment that evening with Thai food, 2 bottles of wine, and a fierce protectiveness that made me want to cry with relief. We sat on my couch as I showed her everything I'd discovered with Vada. "This is insane," Susan said, refilling our glasses. "I always thought Zoe was a bit much, but this is next level psycho." "I keep trying to understand why," I said, pushing my food around my plate. "We've been friends for so long. Some people can't stand to see others happy." Susan took a sip of wine. "Remember when you got that promotion last year?" Zoe barely acknowledged it. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "At your celebration dinner. You were so excited, and she kept changing the subject to her dating problems." Susan shrugged. "I noticed, but I didn't say anything. Didn't seem worth mentioning." The memory resurfaced, Zoe's tight smile as everyone toasted my success, her constant interruptions. I'd attributed it to her having a bad day. "There were other times too," Susan continued. "When you bought your car, when you and Heath got engaged, she always seemed to have a crisis that needed attention whenever something good happened to you." My phone buzzed. A text from my colleague Marcus. "Hey, just checking in. Heard you're going through some personal stuff. If you need more time off, let me know." I stared at the message. I hadn't told anyone at work except Susan about my situation. "What the hell?" I showed Susan the text. "That's weird. Who would have—" She stopped, her eyes widening. "Zoe knows Marcus's wife from yoga, doesn't she?" My stomach dropped. "Yes, they're in the same class." I called Marcus immediately, asking what he'd heard. "Just that you're dealing with some emotional health issues," he said awkwardly. "Tara mentioned it after talking to Zoe yesterday. Said we should give you space." "Marcus, that's not true. Someone stole my identity and is spreading rumors about me." Silence then. "Shit, really? That's terrible." After hanging up, I turned to Susan, my hands shaking with anger. "She's poisoning everyone against me, making me look unstable so no one will believe me when I tell them what she did." "We need to get ahead of this," Susan said. "What did Vada say about Meridian Financial?" "She's setting up a meeting with someone who worked there when Zoe did." I checked my watch. "Tomorrow morning." "Good. In the meantime, maybe we should reach out to people before Zoe gets to them." Susan pulled out her phone. "I can help." We spent the next hour making calls and sending texts to friends and colleagues, briefly explaining that I was dealing with identity theft and that any concerning rumors were related to that situation. Most people were supportive, though a few responses were awkwardly noncommittal. By midnight, Susan had fallen asleep on my couch. I covered her with a blanket and went to my bedroom, exhausted but too wired to sleep. I scrolled through old photos of Zoe and me, trying to pinpoint when things had changed. There we were at her 30th birthday, arms around each other, laughing. At my wedding, her maid of honor speech bringing tears to everyone's eyes. Hiking in the Olympics last summer, posing at the summit. Had she hated me through all of it? Had our entire friendship been a performance? My phone buzzed with a text from Heath. "We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow?" I stared at his message, my first direct contact with him in months. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part needed answers. Fine. Cafe Vita on Pike, 7 a.m. I barely slept, and by 6:45, I was already at the coffee shop, nursing an Americano and rehearsing what I would say. When Heath walked in, the familiar sight of him hit me harder than expected. His purposeful stride, the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was nervous. He sat across from me, looking uncomfortable. Thanks for meeting me. What do you want, Heath? He sighed. Zoe told me about your accusations. Kaya, if you're struggling, there are people who can help. Stop. I held up my hand. I'm not struggling. Zoe stole my credit card information and made thousands in purchases. That's a fact. She showed me the receipts, he countered. She bought those things with her own money. Did she show you the IP address information? The email confirmation sent to my account? I leaned forward. Did she tell you she's been researching my parents and telling people I'm having a mental breakdown? Doubt flickered across his face. Why would she do that? You tell me. You're the one marrying her. His eyes widened slightly. How did you know about that? We haven't announced it yet. She sent me a photo of your engagement celebration. What? No, she wouldn't. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. She knows I wanted to tell you myself, in person. That's why I'm here. I laughed bitterly. How considerate of you. Kaya, listen. He lowered his voice. Things with Zoe happened fast. I never meant to hurt you. Yet, here we are. I stood up. Congratulations on your engagement. I hope you've protected your financial information better than I did. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist. Wait, what do you mean by that? I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me. Ask Zoe about Meridian Financial. Ask her why she really left. His expression changed. What do you know about that? Not enough. Yet. I shouldered my bag. But I will soon. Walking out, I felt my phone buzz with a notification. An email from Vada with the subject line, "Found something big." I opened it to find documents from Meridian Financial's HR department. Confidential termination papers for Zoe, citing unauthorized access to client accounts and misappropriation of funds. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a surge of something like hope. This wasn't just my word against hers anymore. This was evidence of a pattern, and patterns were something I understood very well. Vada's contact at Meridian Financial was a woman named Elise, who agreed to meet me at a quiet bar downtown after work. I arrived early, choosing a booth in the back where we wouldn't be overheard. The termination documents Vada had sent were burning a hole in my bag. I needed to understand exactly what Zoe had done. Elise arrived precisely at 6, her crisp pantsuit and alert eyes marking her as someone who didn't waste time. After ordering drinks, she got straight to the point. I shouldn't be talking to you about this, she said, her voice low. But what Zoe did at Meridian wasn't just unethical. It was predatory. What exactly happened? I asked. Elise took a sip of her martini. She worked in client relations, had access to financial profiles, contact information, the works. We started noticing a pattern. Wealthy clients, especially recent divorcees or widows, would suddenly change their investment strategies after meeting with her. She was stealing from them? Not directly. She'd build relationships with vulnerable clients, gain their trust, then convince them to move money into special investment opportunities. These were real investments, but with hidden referral fees that went to her through a complicated chain. My stomach tightened. Was she caught? Eventually. One client's son was a financial analyst. He reviewed his mother's portfolio and spotted the irregularities. Elise's expression hardened. When confronted, Zoe tried to paint the client as confused and unstable. Sound familiar? I nodded, my throat dry. What happened to her? We fired her, but the client didn't want publicity. No charges were filed. Elise leaned forward. Here's what you need to understand. Zoe doesn't just want money. She wants to be the person who has everything: status, admiration, control, and she'll target anyone who has what she wants. Like me, I said quietly. Like you. Elise checked her watch. I have to go. But there's something else you should know. After she was fired, 3 more clients came forward with similar stories. One lost over $200,000. As Elise left, I sat alone, processing what I'd learned. This wasn't just about my credit card or even Heath. Zoe was systematically dismantling my life because she wanted it for herself. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Emergency at work. Client server crashed. Might need your help remotely. I texted back that I'd be available, then ordered another drink. As I waited, a man approached my table. Kaya, I thought that was you. I looked up to see Fabian, one of Zoe's friends from her yoga studio. We'd met a few times at parties, but I barely knew him. Mind if I join you? He asked. Just for a minute. I hesitated, then gestured to the seat across from me. Sure. He sat down, looking uncomfortable. I overheard Zoe talking about you yesterday at the studio. The things she was saying, they didn't sound right. My guard went up immediately. What kind of things? That you've been harassing her, that you're obsessed with her relationship with Heath and making up stories about her. He fidgeted with a napkin. But the way she was talking, it reminded me of how she talked about her former boss after she left that financial company. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. Why are you telling me this? He sighed. Because she did the same thing to me last year. We dated briefly. When I ended it, she told everyone I'd stalked her, that I was dangerous. I lost friends, got uninvited from social events. Eventually, I had to find a new yoga studio, new hangouts. Why did you go back to her circle? She reached out 6 months later, said she'd exaggerated because she was hurt, apologized. I believed her. He shook his head. But seeing her do it again to you, I had to say something. Do you have any proof of what she did to you? Some texts, emails. He pulled out his phone. I saved everything after things went bad. As he showed me the messages, I felt a strange mix of validation and dread. The patterns were identical: Zoe's manipulation, gaslighting, the careful construction of a narrative that made her the victim. She's engaged to my ex-husband now, I said. Fabian's eyes widened. Heath, the entrepreneur guy? I nodded. That explains the sudden interest in investment properties. At my confused look, he continued. She's been asking me about real estate lately. I'm a commercial broker. She said she and her fiancé are looking to diversify their portfolio. A cold feeling spread through my chest. When did this start? About 2 weeks ago, right after she got engaged. He pulled up an email on his phone. She was particularly interested in this property that's in pre-foreclosure. Owners going through a messy divorce, needs to liquidate quickly. I looked at the email and froze. The property was my parents' winter condo in Arizona, the one they'd put in my name for estate planning purposes years ago. This is my property, I whispered. What? But Zoe said it belonged to an investment group that's dissolving. My hands shook as I pulled up my own email, finding the foreclosure notice I'd dismissed as spam last week. It was real. Somehow Zoe had initiated foreclosure proceedings on my parents' condo. I need to go, I said, gathering my things. Thank you for telling me this. Outside, I called my lawyer, explaining the situation in a rush. He promised to look into it immediately, but warned me that stopping a foreclosure already in progress was complicated. As I hung up, a text came through from an unknown number. Back off or your parents lose everything. Last warning. I stared at the message, my fear transforming into something harder, colder. Zoe wasn't just trying to take my identity or my ex-husband. She was going after my family. The time for defensive moves was over. If Zoe wanted war, I would give her one, and I would make damn sure she regretted ever making me her enemy. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Michael, in his downtown office. The walls were lined with law books that probably hadn't been opened in years, but the intimidating atmosphere felt appropriate for the conversation we needed to have. "I've reviewed the foreclosure documents," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "They appear legitimate on the surface. Someone used your digital signature to initiate the process. Can you stop it?" "Yes, but it will take time and money." He named a figure that made me wince. "The bigger concern is how this happened at all. Your digital signature requires your authentication." "Zoe had access to my accounts," I explained. "She must have found the property documents when she went through my files." Michael leaned back in his chair. "Kaya, this goes beyond civil fraud. This is criminal identity theft, wire fraud, possibly even elder abuse since it involves your parents' retirement property. You need to go to the police." "I've tried. They took a report about the credit card fraud, but said it was he said, she said, without more evidence." I rubbed my temples. "And now Zoe's convinced half the people in my life that I'm having some kind of breakdown. Then we need to build an airtight case." He pulled out a legal pad. "Let's start with everyone who can corroborate your story." By the time I left Michael's office, we had a plan. Gather statements from Vada, Elise, Fabian, and anyone else who could verify Zoe's pattern of behavior. Document everything. Prepare for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. "Heath." "What do you want?" I answered. "We need to talk, in person." His voice sounded strained. "It's important. I'm busy trying to save my parents' retirement home from the foreclosure your fiancé initiated." Silence then. "What are you talking about?" "Ask Zoe. She used my digital signature to start foreclosure proceedings on my parents' condo in Arizona." That can't be right." He sounded genuinely shocked. "Look, please meet me. I need to show you something." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near my office in 30 minutes. When I arrived, Heath was already there, a manila envelope on the table in front of him. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. "What's so important?" He pushed the envelope toward me. "After you mentioned Meridian Financial, I did some digging. Found these in Zoe's home office while she was at yoga. Inside were bank statements showing transfers from multiple accounts into one I didn't recognize, along with a handwritten list of names and figures. My name was at the top, with numbers next to various assets: my condo, my car, my 401k. "She's been planning this for months," Heath said quietly, "using my connections, my information. I had no idea." I looked up at him. "Why should I believe you? You've been with her all this time." "Because I'm on her list, too." He pointed to his name further down the page. With a timeline beside it, 3 months after the wedding, there's a note about accident insurance. A chill ran through me. "You think she's planning to?" "I don't know what she's planning, but I'm not sticking around to find out." He ran a hand through his hair. "I confronted her about Meridian last night. She went ballistic, accused me of spying on her, then got eerily calm and said I'd regret questioning her." "So you're just leaving?" "I've already moved my important stuff out, staying with a friend she doesn't know about." He leaned forward. "Kaya, be careful. When I said I was going out this morning, she asked if I was meeting you, specifically you." My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "Where are you? Zoe just showed up at your office looking for you. Seemed agitated." I showed Heath the message, my heart racing. "She's looking for me. You can't go back there." Heath stood up. "Come on, I'll drive you somewhere safe." "No." I gathered my things. "I need to get to my parents. If she's escalating, they could be in danger." "Then I'm coming with you." "Why would you do that?" "Because this is partly my fault." His expression was pained. "I should have seen through her. Should have asked more questions when she suddenly had all this information about your life. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Vada. Someone tried to access your new accounts, she said without preamble. They had all the right security question answers, but the two-factor authentication stopped them. When? Just now. The IP address traces back to your office building. Zoe was at my workplace, actively trying to hack my accounts. This was happening now. Vada, I need a favor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Can you monitor all activity on my parents' accounts? And mine? I think Zoe's making her move. Already on it. Where are you? With Heath. He found evidence of what she's planning. Vada was silent for a moment. Can you trust him? I looked at Heath, who was watching me with concern. I don't know, but right now, he's the only one who knows how she thinks. After hanging up, I turned to Heath. I need to warn my parents, then get somewhere safe to figure out our next move. As we hurried to his car, my phone buzzed again. A text from Fabian. Zoe knows we talked. She just called me, furious. Said she's taking care of the Kaya problem once and for all. Be careful. In the same moment, an email notification appeared, a bank alert about a large withdrawal request from my parents' account. It was happening faster than I'd anticipated. Drive, I told Heath as I called my parents. We don't have much time. Whatever Zoe was planning, she was accelerating her timeline. The hunter had become the hunted, and now it was a race to see who would strike first. My parents weren't answering their phones. After the fifth call went to voicemail, panic clawed at my throat. They always answer, I told Heath as he drove. Always. Try their neighbors, he suggested, eyes fixed on the road. I found their neighbor's number and called. When she answered, I forced myself to sound calm. Hi, Mrs. Donovan. It's Kaya. I'm trying to reach my parents but can't get through. Have you seen them today? Oh, Kaya. Yes, they left about an hour ago with that lovely friend of yours, the pretty one with the dark hair. My blood turned to ice. Zoe was there? Yes, she said there was some emergency with you. They seemed quite worried. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Zoe has my parents, I told Heath. She told them there was an emergency with me. Heath's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Where would she take them? I closed my eyes, trying to think. My condo, maybe? Or... A memory surfaced. Zoe mentioning a lake house her family owned, a place she'd gone when she needed to handle things privately. The lake house, I said, on Lake Sammamish. She has a family property there. Heath nodded and changed direction. Call the police. And tell them what? That my ex-husband's fiancé who stole my identity has now convinced my parents to go somewhere with her? They'll think I'm crazy. Tell them you have evidence of identity theft and elder abuse, and you're concerned for your parents' safety. I made the call, but, as expected, the dispatcher was skeptical. They promised to send an officer to the lake house address, but I could tell from her tone that it wasn't a priority. While Heath drove, I called Susan, Vada, and my lawyer, updating them on the situation. Vada confirmed more attempted withdrawals from my accounts and said she was documenting everything. Susan offered to meet us at the lake house. My lawyer advised caution but said he'd start emergency legal proceedings. As we approached Lake Sammamish, I received a text from an unknown number. If you want to see your parents again, come to the lake house alone. Tell Heath to stay away. I'll know if you bring anyone. I showed Heath the message. It's a trap, he said. I know, but I have to go. I looked out at the lake coming into view. Drop me off before the property. I'll approach on foot. Kaya, no, it's too dangerous. She has my parents, Heath. My voice broke. I don't have a choice. He pulled over a quarter-mile from the lake house. I'm calling the police again, and if you're not out in 20 minutes, I'm coming in. I nodded, suddenly grateful for his presence. Before getting out, I forwarded all the evidence I had to Susan, Vada, and my lawyer with a message. If anything happens to me, take this to the police. The walk to the lake house gave me time to think. Zoe had always been calculating, but this level of escalation suggested desperation. She must have realized I was closing in on her, gathering evidence. This was her last attempt to silence me. The lake house came into view, a modern A-frame with large windows overlooking the water. My parents' car was parked outside. Through the window, I could see them sitting at a dining table, Zoe standing nearby. I took a deep breath and approached the front door. It opened before I could knock. "Finally," Zoe said, her smile cold. "Your parents have been so worried." I stepped inside, scanning the room. My parents looked confused but unharmed. "Kaya!" My mother stood up. "What's going on? Zoe said you were in some kind of trouble." "I am, Mom." I kept my eyes on Zoe. "But not the kind she told you about." Zoe's smile didn't waver. "Kaya's been under a lot of stress lately. She's been making some concerning accusations. Like how you stole my identity?" I pulled out my phone. "Or how you used my digital signature to initiate foreclosure on Mom and Dad's condo? Or how you've been systematically trying to take over my life." My father stood now, looking between us. "What is she talking about, Zoe?" "See what I mean?" Zoe sighed dramatically. "These delusions are why we're worried." "They're not delusions." I stepped forward, showing them my phone with the evidence Vada had compiled. "She did the same thing at Meridian Financial. It's all documented." Zoe's expression hardened. "Your daughter needs help. She's obsessed with me since I got engaged to Heath." "Is that why you have this?" I pulled up the photo of the list Heath had found, with my assets itemized. "Or why you tried to access my new bank accounts today? Or why you're on the verge of transferring money from my parents' retirement fund?" My mother gasped, reaching for her phone. "Margaret, don't," Zoe snapped, her composure cracking. "This is exactly what she wants." "What I want," I said, my voice steady, "is for you to stay away from my family." Zoe laughed, a brittle sound. "Your family? You couldn't even keep your husband interested. You couldn't even see what was happening right in front of you for months." "You're right." I took another step toward her. "I trusted you. That was my mistake." "Your mistake was thinking you deserved the life you had." Her voice rose. "You had everything handed to you. Loving parents, good job, perfect husband. You never had to fight for anything. And that justifies stealing from me, manipulating my parents, trying to take everything I have? You never appreciated any of it," she shouted, mask fully slipping now. "I deserved it more." The room fell silent. My parents stared at Zoe in shock. "Zoe," my father said quietly, "did you really try to take our condo?" She turned to him, scrambling to recover. "No, of course not. Kaya's twisting things." "Stop lying," I interrupted, my voice stronger than I'd felt in weeks. "It's over, Zoe. The police are on their way. Vada has documented every attempt you made to access my accounts. Elise from Meridian is willing to testify about what you did there. Fabian has records of your manipulation. And Heath found your plans." At the mention of Heath, something dangerous flashed in her eyes. "Heath wouldn't betray me. He already has. He's the one who brought me here." As if on cue, we heard sirens in the distance. Zoe's face contorted with rage. She lunged toward me, but my father stepped between us. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Zoe, I think you should wait outside for the police." For a moment, I thought she might attack him too. Then her shoulders slumped, the fight visibly leaving her. "You'll regret this," she said, looking directly at me. "All of you." As she walked out the front door, my mother rushed to my side, pulling me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry we didn't believe you, she whispered. I held on to her, watching through the window as police cars pulled up and officers approached Zoe. It wasn't the revenge I'd imagined. There was no satisfaction in watching her being handcuffed, no triumph in her downfall, just relief that it was over, and a quiet certainty that I'd found something she never had, the strength to fight for what was mine without becoming what I hated. The police questioned us for hours. My parents and I sat at the lake house dining table, going through everything: the identity theft, the foreclosure attempt, the manipulation. When they finally left, taking Zoe with them in handcuffs, exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. You should stay with us tonight, my mother said, her hand warm on my shoulder. I nodded, too drained to argue. Heath had left after giving his statement, promising to send me copies of everything he'd found at Zoe's apartment. The betrayal still stung, but I felt an unexpected gratitude for his help when it mattered most. That night in my childhood bedroom, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Morning brought a flurry of activity. My lawyer called with updates on the legal proceedings against Zoe. The fraud department at my bank confirmed they were reversing all unauthorized charges. Susan texted that she'd cleared my schedule for the week and was handling the client emergency herself. After breakfast, my father found me sitting on the back porch, staring at the garden he'd meticulously maintained for decades. Your mother and I have been talking, he said, settling into the chair beside me. We'd like you to consider moving back home for a while. I turned to look at him, surprised. Dad, I'm 34. I know. He smiled slightly. But after everything that's happened, we just want you close. The offer was tempting: the safety of my childhood home, the comfort of my parents' presence, but something inside me resisted. I need to go back to my place, I said gently. I can't let what Zoe did make me retreat from my life. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. You always were the strongest one in the family. I don't feel strong, I admitted. I feel broken open. That's where the real strength comes from, Kaya. He patted my hand. From putting yourself back together in a way that makes sense to you, not anyone else. Later that afternoon, Vada arrived with a small team of cybersecurity experts she'd enlisted to help secure all our accounts and devices. As they worked, she pulled me aside. There's something you should see, she said, opening her laptop. I found this in Zoe's cloud storage. On the screen was a document titled Contingency Plan. It contained detailed instructions for what to do if her schemes were discovered, including a list of people to contact with pre-written stories about my supposed instability. She was thorough, I murmured. Sociopaths usually are. Vada scrolled down. But here's the interesting part. She had a section about Heath, too. Plans to isolate him from his friends, gain control of his business assets. I scanned the document, a chill running through me as I recognized the pattern. She did the same thing to me that she was planning to do to him, with one key difference. Vada pointed to a section labeled Timeline. With you, it was about taking what you had. With Heath, it was about becoming you. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Zoe hadn't just wanted my possessions or my ex-husband. She had wanted my life, my relationships, my identity, everything that made me who I was. There's more, Vada said quietly. She kept journals, years of them. Your name appears in entries dating back to when you first met. Show me. The earliest entry was from our college years. Met Kaya today. She has everything: the looks, the brains, the easy confidence. People gravitate to her without her even trying. I need to study her, figure out what makes her special. Then maybe I can become that too. I closed the laptop, unable to read more. All this time, I thought she was my friend. She was, Vada said. In her way. She just couldn't separate admiration from envy, love from possession. That evening, after everyone had gone, I returned to my condo. Standing in the doorway, I felt a momentary hesitation. This space had been violated, my privacy shattered. But as I stepped inside, I realized something important. These walls had witnessed my breakdown, but they would also see my rebuilding. I moved through each room, reclaiming it. In the kitchen, I threw out the wine glasses Zoe and I had shared so many conversations over. In the living room, I rearranged the furniture, creating a new configuration that felt entirely mine. In my bedroom, I changed the sheets, opened the windows, let fresh air sweep through. My phone rang, Susan checking in. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm recalibrating," I said, surprising myself with the word choice, figuring out who I am when I'm not defined by betrayal. "And who is that?" I looked around my transformed space. Someone stronger than before, someone who won't mistake manipulation for love again. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The blank document stared back at me. I began to type. "To whom it may concern, I am writing to formally withdraw all charges against Zoe James." My finger hovered over the period key. Then I deleted the sentence and started again. "To the district attorney, regarding the case against Zoe James, I wish to provide additional evidence of her pattern of behavior." As I typed, cataloging everything with clinical precision, I felt no vindictiveness, no thirst for revenge, just clarity. Zoe needed to face consequences, not because I wanted to punish her, but because it was the truth. And after everything, truth was the one thing I refused to compromise. When I finished, I sent the document to my lawyer, then closed my laptop. Outside my window, the city lights sparkled against the darkening sky. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it would no longer be the defining chapter. I picked up my phone and deleted Zoe's contact information, her photos, every digital trace of her presence in my life. Not to erase the past, but to make space for whatever came next. Some friendships leave scars. The deepest ones change who you are. But standing in my reclaimed space, I finally understood. The person I was becoming after Zoe's betrayal was entirely my own creation, and far stronger than the woman she had tried to destroy.
Hi there, I'm Farah. And on my 20th birthday, my parents kept telling me, "Just wait, something big is coming." Turns out, it wasn't a party. It wasn't a gift. It was the moment I finally realized I was never really part of this family. For years, they smiled in my face, while taking everything behind my back, my tuition money, my future, even my name on a loan I never signed. They laughed about me when they thought I wasn't listening. They erased me from their will like I was nothing. But the worst part wasn't what they took. It was how long they let me believe I mattered. You think that's the worst of it? Wait until you hear how far they went to make sure I stayed invisible. For weeks, my parents had kept dropping hints like confetti at a surprise party I wasn't invited to. "Just wait," my mother kept saying. "Something big is coming." My dad would nod along with that smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes. My siblings, Vesper and Calum, would shoot each other these knowing looks whenever I asked what was going on, like I was the only one not in on the joke. It was spring in Charleston, the kind of soft, bright April that made the air smell like wet grass and blooming jasmine. I was turning 32, old enough to know that surprises rarely worked in my favor, but young enough to still hope, foolishly, that maybe this time would be different. The day started normally. I woke early, checked my email out of habit, grabbed a coffee from the corner cafe on my way to the design firm where I'd worked the last 6 years. My phone buzzed around noon. Mom again. "You're gonna love what's coming. Just wait till tonight." I smiled politely, texted back a thumbs up emoji, but something inside me stayed unsettled. After work, I passed by the university's bursar office. I had been taking night classes for my master's in digital arts. Nothing major, one course at a time, paid up front. I logged in to check my account, planning to make next month's tuition payment. My stomach dropped. Zero balance. No, worse, not just zero. It said withdrawal confirmed, $2,000, gone. I stared at the screen, trying to breathe past the sudden tightness in my chest. It wasn't possible. I knew I hadn't touched that money. That account was for tuition only. I'd been putting aside every extra dollar I had to avoid student loans. I checked again. Same result. The withdrawal date? 3 days ago. On the drive home, I kept replaying the past few weeks in my head. The way Mom and Dad had smiled a little too wide. How Vesper had joked at Sunday dinner. "Don't worry, Farah. You'll finally feel included." I had laughed then, but now the words crawled under my skin. When I walked through the front door that evening, the house was too quiet. No balloons, no decorations, just the tick of the kitchen clock. Mom was in the living room, scrolling her phone, her feet tucked under her like she didn't have a care in the world. "Hey, sweetheart," she greeted without looking up. "Everything okay?" I swallowed. "Did you take money from my tuition account?" She blinked like I'd asked if she borrowed sugar. "Oh, that? Don't worry about it. You'll understand after tonight. Just trust us, okay?" Trust. That word hit harder than I expected. I nodded stiffly and went upstairs, locking the door behind me. It wasn't until later, around 9, after dinner and small talk that felt like swallowing broken glass, that I checked my email again. A notification from one of the credit monitoring sites I'd signed up for years ago, mostly to protect myself from phishing scams. Alert, new loan opened in your name. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked the link. A personal loan for $7,000, taken out 4 days ago. Cosigner, Seraphine Duval, my mother. The room tilted. I scrolled through the fine print, my name everywhere, my credit score stamped at the bottom like a joke. She hadn't even told me. I wanted to run downstairs, to scream, to demand how she could possibly think this was okay. But instead, I sat there frozen, staring at the screen, the weight of years pressing down on my chest. This wasn't the first time my parents made decisions for my own good without asking me. But this was theft. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. It was almost 10 now, the hum of cicadas weaving with the distant sound of cars along the harbor. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Instead of storming downstairs, I started gathering everything. Screenshots of the bank withdrawal, the loan document, emails. If they wanted to play games, I would keep score. By midnight, I was staring at the ceiling, the glow of my phone screen fading beside me. That's when it happened. The message. A ping. From Vesper. "Make sure she doesn't find out before tomorrow. It'll ruin everything." I stared at it, my heart slowing. The message disappeared a second later, deleted, but not before I saw it. They weren't planning something for me. They were planning something without me. The message wasn't meant for me, but it confirmed my worst fear. I sat there in the dark, the glow from my phone burning into my eyes. That one sentence from Vesper wasn't just a mistake. It was a confession. Proof that whatever my family had been planning wasn't for me. It was about me. Or worse, against me. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling until dawn began creeping in, washing the room with that soft, colorless light before sunrise. My mind kept looping the last few weeks, every time they'd smiled a little too much, every vague promise of a big surprise. By 7:30, I had showered, dressed, and opened my laptop. I needed to distract myself, but my hands hovered over the keyboard without typing. My stomach twisted, heavy with something I hadn't wanted to name before. Dread. The ping of another message pulled me back. This time, it wasn't from Vesper. It was from Aunt Celeste, in the family group chat. "Make sure you leave early tomorrow. Don't let Farah find out. It'll ruin the trip." The message sat there for 2 full seconds before disappearing. Deleted. But not before I screenshotted it. I stared at the image, the edges of my vision pulsing. So it wasn't just Vesper. It was all of them. My parents, my siblings, even Celeste, planning a trip without me, whispering behind my back like I was some fragile ornament they decided didn't belong on the shelf anymore. My phone buzzed again. Mom, texting like nothing had happened. "Morning, honey. Big day tomorrow. Hope you're ready." Ready for what? To be left behind. I spent the afternoon going through work emails half-heartedly, distracted by the weight pressing against my ribs. Around 5, I shut my laptop, unable to focus anymore. I needed air, space, something to clear the fog creeping into my chest. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, letting my feet take me through the quiet streets of our neighborhood. Magnolia trees lined the sidewalks, petals scattered like confetti on the pavement. I barely noticed. As the sun began to set, casting gold over the rooftops, I found myself circling back home. My parents' car wasn't in the driveway, which didn't surprise me. They were probably at Celeste's, finalizing whatever betrayal they thought I hadn't caught on to. I almost walked straight to my room, but something stopped me outside the kitchen. Voices. Low, hurried. I leaned closer. Vesper's voice, sharp and familiar. "She's not going to find out, don't worry." Then Calum. "She's too busy with her boring job to notice anything, and even if she does, well, maybe it's time she learns her place." Vesper laughed, soft but cutting. "After this trip, she'll finally get it. We're done pretending." My chest tightened so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. They weren't just forgetting me. They were erasing me. On purpose. I backed away quietly, careful not to make the floorboards creak. Upstairs, I closed my bedroom door, my fingers shaking as I opened my phone and typed a single sentence into my notes app. "They want me gone." I spent the next hour saving everything. The messages, the screenshots, even the timestamp of the conversation I'd overheard. Not because I wanted to confront them yet, but because I needed to remember I wasn't crazy. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling again. But instead of replaying their words, my mind began piecing together every moment that had led to this. The subtle digs at family dinners, the way my parents always prioritized Vesper and Calum's needs over mine, how they'd told me I was too serious, too sensitive, too much. It wasn't new. It had been happening for years. And tomorrow, my birthday, would be the final proof. But before I could sink fully into sleep, I got up, restless, and walked over to the old bookshelf in the hallway. My fingers ran over the spines until they stopped at a dusty, leather-bound photo album. I hadn't opened it in years. Back in my room, I flipped the cover open, and there it was. A picture I hadn't thought about in over a decade. A forgotten memory I had buried long ago. I turned the page of the album slowly, my fingers brushing over the worn photograph like it might disappear if I moved too fast. In the picture, I couldn't have been older than 5, small, dark-haired, sitting alone on a park bench. My knees scraped, hands folded neatly in my lap, no smile. The memory hit me like cold water, that day at Hampton Park. I had been too young to understand why no one came back for me. We'd gone there for a family picnic. Me, Vesper, Calum, Mom, and Dad. The weather had been warm, the air sticky with spring. They'd packed sandwiches and sodas, and I'd been so excited to spend the afternoon outside. Somewhere between chasing butterflies and climbing the jungle gym, I had wandered off. I remembered sitting down when I got tired, thinking they'd come back any minute. But they didn't. They didn't even realize I was missing. Hours later, a park officer had found me, alone and crying quietly. He brought me home, where Mom opened the door and gasped like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh my God, we didn't even notice. You're so quiet, sweetie. You're like a little shadow sometimes." She'd laughed like it was a joke, brushing it off. Dad had ruffled my hair and said, "You've got to learn to keep up, kiddo." They told the story at family parties for years. How little Farah had vanished for an afternoon because she was too quiet, too serious, too easy to forget. I closed the album gently, like if I slammed it shut, the memory would spill out and drown me. It wasn't the first time they'd forgotten me. It was the first time I'd realized they never even looked. The house was silent around me, the kind of deep silence that presses against your skin. Outside, the streetlights buzzed faintly, throwing soft halos onto the pavement. My phone lay beside me, dark and still. Lying back, I stared at the ceiling again, feeling the weight in my chest growing heavier. That day in the park wasn't an accident. It wasn't a one-off. It was the blueprint. Every missed school recital, every dinner conversation where I faded into the wallpaper, every birthday where they gave Vesper and Calum the spotlight and handed me a candle to hold. It all made sense now. I'd spent years thinking I needed to work harder, speak louder, smile bigger so they'd see me. But tonight, I saw them. I saw who they were, and I saw who I wasn't to them. I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My hands moved on their own, grabbing my phone, reopening every screenshot I had saved. The messages, the loan, the missing tuition, Celeste's slip-up, Vesper's deleted text, all of it. Each one another breadcrumb in a trail I could no longer ignore. The clock on my nightstand blinked 2:13 a.m. I should have been asleep, resting before the so-called big day my family kept promising me. Instead, I was wide awake, my mind sharper than it had been in years. I wasn't going to play along anymore. I wouldn't wait for their surprise. I would prepare for it. Downstairs, the faint murmur of voices drifted up the staircase. I glanced at the clock again. It was too late for casual conversation. I crept to my door, easing it open just a crack. Laughter floated up from the living room. Familiar, casual, but tinged with something else. Something mean. I could hear Mom's voice, light and sweet. "She's always been a little slow, you know. Never quite caught on." Vesper's laugh followed. "That's why tomorrow will be so much fun. She'll finally get the message." A chair scraped against the hardwood floor. Calum's voice, quieter but unmistakable. "She won't see it coming. She never does." The words hit harder than anything else so far. They weren't laughing about something funny. They were laughing about me. I didn't need to hear the punchline to know the joke was on me. The sound of their laughter stuck with me long after it faded. It echoed in the silence of my room, bouncing off the walls like a cruel reminder of where I stood in this family. Or rather, where I didn't. By the time morning came, I hadn't slept. I drifted between restless thoughts and stiff resentment, the weight of their words pressing down harder than the pillow beneath my head. The day crawled by with unbearable normalcy. My parents moved around the house like nothing had happened, like they hadn't been laughing about me the night before. Vesper hummed in the kitchen. Calum joked with Dad over coffee. Mom asked if I wanted pancakes, smiling like everything was fine. I almost wanted to scream. By evening, they called me down for dinner. I could have made an excuse, stayed in my room, but something told me to show up. If they wanted a show, I'd sit front row. The table was set perfectly. Candles, my mother's best dishes, the smell of roast chicken heavy in the air. A birthday dinner, they claimed. But it felt like walking into a lion's den wearing a paper crown. Vesper raised her glass first, flashing me a wide smile. "To our little sister, the serious one," Dad chuckled. "Always so focused, never quite gets the joke." Calum leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Maybe tonight she'll finally lighten up." Mom chimed in sweetly. "You know, Farah, we just want you to loosen up, sweetheart. You always make things so heavy." I kept my face neutral, slicing into the chicken on my plate, even as my stomach twisted. Vesper added casually, "Maybe tomorrow, when you see what we've got planned, you'll finally smile." Calum nodded, wiping his mouth. "If she even notices." The table erupted in light laughter. I stayed quiet, chewing slowly, my eyes fixed on my plate. They thought I was too quiet? Good. Let them wonder what I was thinking. After dinner, I helped clear the dishes without a word. Mom hummed beside me at the sink, acting like nothing was off, like they hadn't just mocked me to my face. Typical. Later that night, once everyone had gone upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table alone. The overhead light cast long shadows across the countertop. I reached for the pile of mail near the fridge, flipping absently through overdue bills and grocery lists, until something caught my eye. A legal-sized envelope, half open, the name on it unmistakable. Ambrose Duval, Last Will and Testament. A cold wave passed through me. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The draft was dated 3 weeks ago. The contents? Everything. The house, the savings, the investments, all to be divided between Vesper and Calum. My name wasn't mentioned once, not even out of obligation. My fingers tightened around the paper as if I could will the words to change. They weren't just planning to exclude me from a trip. They had erased me from their lives. Officially, legally. This wasn't neglect. It wasn't ignorance. It was a choice. I sat there for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Somewhere upstairs, I could hear Mom laughing softly at something on TV. Something inside me shifted then, like a crack running through glass. There was nothing left to hope for. Tomorrow wasn't about celebration. It was about confirmation. As I folded the will back into the envelope and slipped it beneath the pile of mail, I heard the faint buzz of a phone downstairs. A voice. Mom's. Muffled but sharp. "I don't care what she thinks. Just make sure Rowan stays out of this. We don't need her meddling." I froze. They weren't done yet, and now they were targeting the only person left who still stood by me. I stood frozen in the dark, Mom's voice still ringing in my ears. It wasn't enough for them to cut me out. Now, they wanted to cut out Rowan too. The one person who had never made me feel like an afterthought. The next morning, I went through the motions. I brewed coffee. I folded the blanket on the couch. I smiled when Mom greeted me with her overly sweet, "Happy birthday, darling," like she hadn't been scheming the night before. By noon, I had answered a few work emails, forcing myself to look productive, even though my stomach churned. That's when I heard her again. Mom's voice, sharp and deliberate, floating through the half-open kitchen door. "Rowan, sweetheart, I wanted to touch base before tonight." My chest tightened. I edged closer, careful not to make a sound. "We've planned something really special for Farah. It's a family thing, you understand. We wouldn't want her distracted. I'm sure she's told you how sensitive she can be." There was a pause. Then Mom's voice softened, almost syrupy. "If you really care about her, you'll step back and let us handle this." My hands curled into fists. Rowan's voice filtered faintly through the speakerphone. "I don't think she'll see it that way." Mom's reply was instant, cold. "Well, she doesn't need to know. It's what's best for her. We know how to take care of our own." I backed away before I could hear the rest, my heart pounding. They were making sure I had no one left. That evening, dinner was quiet, too quiet. The weight of unspoken words hung heavy around the table. No one mentioned Rowan. No one mentioned anything real. Afterward, I went upstairs, my footsteps deliberate, heavy against the wood. I sat at my desk, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My birthday, the day they'd promised something big. They weren't lying. They were about to erase me completely. I scribbled a note and left it on the kitchen table, the pen pressing hard into the paper. "You can plan all you want, but I'm done playing your game." Then I went back upstairs, shutting my door gently but firmly behind me. The next day, sometime in the early afternoon, Rowan's name flashed across my phone screen. "Your mom called me," her text read. "Said you'd be busy tonight with family. I didn't want to make things harder for you. Let me know when you want to talk." My throat tightened. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I didn't reply. I couldn't drag her into this any further. The afternoon dragged on, each hour crawling slower than the last. I watched the clock hit 5, then 6, the weight of everything pressing against my chest. The house was too quiet. By 7, I was curled up on my bed, the day nearly done, the silence louder than any celebration they could have planned. That's when my phone buzzed again, a new notification, and when I saw what it was, I knew. This was it, the final push I needed. I grabbed my phone without thinking, thumb swiping across the screen. The notification glowed like a flare in the dark. A photo, posted by Vesper. I tapped it open, and there it was, the final knife in my back. My family, standing on a sunlit beach. All of them. Mom in her favorite sundress. Dad grinning like he hadn't spent the last month tearing me apart. Vesper, flawless as always, her arms slung casually around Calum's shoulders. Even Aunt Celeste in the background holding a cocktail. The caption hit harder than the image. Finally, a family getaway. No negativity, just fun. #family time, #freedom. Beneath it, a comment from Vesper. "Good thing Farah won't notice. She's too boring anyway." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. The timestamp on the post? Yesterday. The day before my birthday. The day they all promised to make special. My throat tightened as I swiped through the rest of Vesper's feed. Photo after photo. Dinner by the water, sunset selfies, cocktails lined up on the table. Story clips of them laughing, dancing, living. Without me. They hadn't just left me out. They'd planned this. They'd stolen my tuition money, lied to my face, and spent it on a trip. A celebration of freedom from me. My fingers hovered over the phone, trembling. For a moment, I wanted to throw it across the room, to scream, to let the rage spill out of me like wildfire. But I didn't. Instead, I set it down carefully and walked to the window. Outside, the Charleston streets were still and quiet, the occasional car passing by in the distance. The same streets I'd walked 1,000 times, trying to find my place in a family that never wanted me. I sat down at my desk, pulled my laptop toward me, and opened the folder I'd been building. Screenshots, bank statements, messages, the loan paperwork with my name tied to it. Everything. Piece by piece, I laid it out like a puzzle, the picture finally clear. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had erased me, intentionally, methodically, and tonight, they had made it public. I stopped crying somewhere between saving the last screenshot and renaming the folder, Receipts. The clock read 9:37 p.m. when I finally sat back. My room was dark except for the glow of my screen, my phone still lying face down on the bed. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was done. Done letting them decide my worth. Done playing the quiet daughter, the afterthought, the joke. The sound of the front door slamming downstairs startled me. Footsteps moved quickly across the hardwood floor, muffled voices sharp and frantic. I reached for my phone just as another notification lit up the screen. A message, but not from them, from Rowan. And when I read it, I realized their attack wasn't over. This time they were going after the only person I had left. The message from Rowan was short, but it knocked the air out of me. Your mom called me. She told me to leave you alone. She said I'm making everything worse, that I'm a bad influence. Farah, she said if I keep texting you, she'll make sure I lose my scholarship. I read it 3 times before the words finally sank in. They'd threatened her. They hadn't just tried to shut me out. Now they were coming for the only person left who cared about me. My phone slipped from my hand onto the bed as I sat frozen, the weight of their cruelty settling heavy in my chest. It wasn't enough for them to cut me out. They wanted to cut me off, make sure I had no one, nowhere to turn. For a long moment I didn't move. Then something inside me snapped. I stood up, pacing my room like my skin was too tight. Their laughter, their lies, the will, the fake smiles, the beach photos, it all swirled in my head like a storm. And now they were trying to ruin Rowan's life too. I wouldn't let them. I stormed downstairs without thinking, needing to move, needing to breathe. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I passed the kitchen, my eyes catching something out of place on the counter. Mom's old iPad, unlocked. She must have forgotten to log out after checking recipes or her online banking, the way she always did. Normally, I wouldn't care. But tonight wasn't normal. Something told me to look. I picked up the iPad, opened the Messages app out of habit, and there it was. At the top of the list, a group chat. Family without Farah. My heart stopped. I tapped it open and what I found nearly buckled my knees. Message after message, weeks, months, all of them mocking, scheming, cruel. She's always been so dramatic. Don't tell her about the trip, she'll ruin the vibe. Can't believe she still thinks she's part of this family. Honestly, it'll be easier without her hanging around. Make sure Rowan doesn't drag her back in. Even Dad, even Calum, even Celeste. Every single one of them, laughing behind my back, erasing me from their lives like I was nothing but noise. My hands shook as I scrolled further. Photos of their family dinners, without me. Plans for their beach trip, months before they told me anything. Even the day they applied for the loan in my name, Seraphine had written, "She'll never notice, she never does." My chest felt hollow, like something had cracked wide open and there was nothing left inside. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I took screenshots, every message, every comment, every plan to humiliate me. Then I closed the iPad gently, carefully, and walked back upstairs like nothing had happened. In my room, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and added every screenshot to the folder I had been building. Receipts, evidence. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady, my mind clear. The game was over. They wanted me invisible. They wanted me erased. But tomorrow, I'd make sure they could never hide what they'd done. The house was silent when I woke the next morning. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was empty, hollow, like the aftermath of a storm. But I wasn't empty. I knew exactly what I had to do. After showering, I sat at my desk, pulling my hair back into a tight ponytail, keeping my hands busy so I wouldn't lose focus. There was no more room for doubt, no more space left for hope. I opened my laptop and printed everything, every screenshot, every message, the loan application, the withdrawal slips from the bank account, the group chat, the one they thought I'd never see. I sorted the papers into neat stacks, sliding them into a folder labeled in big black letters, Receipts. It took me over an hour, but when I zipped the folder shut, it felt like I was sealing away the last decade of being invisible. By late afternoon, the front door slammed downstairs, loud voices and luggage thuds filling the space like they hadn't disappeared days ago. I didn't rush. I waited until I heard their footsteps scatter. Mom probably unpacking, Vesper laughing too loudly about something, Dad on the phone. Then I walked downstairs, folder in hand. They were gathered in the living room, still sun-kissed from their little beach escape, chatting casually like they hadn't spent the last week erasing me. Mom noticed me first. "Oh, sweetheart, we've been planning something for you tonight. It'll be so special," Vesper chimed in from the couch. "Yeah, you're gonna love it. We figured you could use a little surprise." Dad barely glanced up from his phone. "Glad you finally came downstairs. We were wondering when you'd join us." I set the folder down on the dining table, flipping it open without a word. They all fell quiet. "What's this?" Caleb asked, voice tightening. I looked at them, really looked, for the first time in weeks. "This," I said calmly, "is who you really are." One by one, I slid the papers across the table. The screenshots from the group chat, the bank records, the loan in my name, the photo album from their beach trip, the comments about how boring and negative I was, the threats against Rowan. Vesper's smile disappeared first. Mom's hands started to fidget. Dad set his phone down slowly, the tension sharp in his jaw. For the first time, none of them had anything to say. I stood there in the middle of the room, not waiting for their apologies, because I knew they wouldn't come. I took a slow breath and said the words I had rehearsed in my head all night. "I'm done." Mom blinked like she hadn't heard me right. "Farah, sweetheart." "No," I cut her off, my voice steady. "You've made it clear. You've been making it clear for years. I'm not part of this family, so I won't be your scapegoat anymore." I slid one final paper toward them. A list of my accounts, my tuition paperwork, everything I had moved out of their control. "I'm moving out," I said simply, "and I will no longer pay for any of this. For you." Dad scoffed, trying to regain control. "Farah, don't be dramatic. You're misunderstanding." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I understand more than you ever wanted me to." I turned to leave, but before I reached the stairs, I paused. "If any of you try to manipulate me again," I said without looking back, "I'll make sure everyone sees what's in that folder." I walked upstairs, my legs trembling but my back straight. For the first time, the silence in the house wasn't suffocating. It felt like freedom. But even after all this, one question lingered. Would they ever truly regret it? The next morning, the house felt heavier than ever. No one spoke at breakfast. The folder I had left on the dining table was still there, untouched, like a loaded gun no one dared to pick up. I ate quietly at the counter, while Mom moved stiffly around the kitchen, her movements sharper than usual. Vesper wasn't there. She hadn't come home the night before. Dad scrolled his phone without looking at me. It was over. But the weight of what remained wasn't something I could shake off in a day. That afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the blinds, Seraphine finally broke the silence. "You've always been so dramatic, Farah," she muttered, rinsing a mug at the sink. "You act like we were monsters." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. You never understood, she continued, her voice brittle, how hard it was to love someone who kept pushing us away. I turned to look at her then. Really look. Her face wasn't angry. It wasn't even apologetic. It was defensive. Cornered. Because the truth wasn't that I pushed them away. It was that they'd been pushing me out for years. That night, Vesper came home, slammed her bedroom door without a word. Caleb avoided me completely. Dad never even looked up from his emails. Not one of them apologized. Not one. 2 days later, I walked out of that house for good. With Rowan's help, I signed a lease on a tiny one-bedroom apartment not far from campus. It wasn't much. Cracked linoleum floors, outdated cabinets. But it was mine. Every box I unpacked felt like peeling away another layer of who they told me I was. Invisible. Forgettable. A footnote. Not anymore. When I filed to remove my parents as financial guardians, Seraphine called twice. I didn't pick up. Her last voicemail was short. You'll regret this. But I didn't. Instead, I shared my story anonymously on a student forum. Not the financial details, not the lawsuits that had already started brewing behind the scenes. Just the simple truth. Sometimes, the people who say they love you will also be the ones who erase you. And you don't owe them your silence. I never expected the flood of replies. Students, strangers, even professors who wrote, I've been there. You're not alone. It didn't fix everything. But it reminded me that I wasn't broken. The fallout came fast after that. The university launched an investigation into the misuse of my tuition funds. Seraphine's name appeared in formal reports: identity fraud, financial misconduct. Dad's business partners quietly backed away once the whispers reached them. Clients stopped calling. Vesper vanished from social media. Caleb never said a word. Months passed. Spring melted into summer, the heat settling heavy over Charleston's streets. One Saturday, I found myself walking past the old city park, the one where, years ago, they had forgotten me on a bench and laughed about it afterward like it was nothing. I paused at the entrance, watching the kids on the swings, the parents chatting on benches. That forgotten version of me, small, scared, waiting, wasn't here anymore. They tried to erase me, but I've never seen myself clearer. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message. Not from them. It was from Rowan. Check your mailbox. I left something for you. I smiled. Small, real. Because life always writes new chapters, even after the worst ones. Before I close this chapter, let me tell you something. Not as the girl who was forgotten on her 20th birthday, but as someone who finally stopped waiting for people to see her worth. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most will be the ones who hurt you the deepest. But their choices don't define who you are. You do. You are not invisible. You are not too much, too quiet, too serious, too anything. You are exactly enough, and you don't need anyone's permission to exist fully, to stand up for yourself, to rewrite your story. Family isn't always who you share blood with. Sometimes, family is who shows up when everyone else leaves. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own home? Have you ever had to walk away from people you thought would always be there? If this story touched something in you, drop A in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't like this story, tell me why. I want to know your perspective. This space is for real conversations. If you want more stories like this, raw, real, sometimes messy, but always honest, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, for listening, for seeing me. Hi there, I'm Ingrid. And yes, my sister fired me, right after our dad handed her the company. She didn't call, didn't explain, just erased me like I was never part of it. But what she didn't know was that pushing me out would cost her everything. She thought I'd disappear quietly. The first thing that felt off was the coffee. I always brewed it at 7:15, just before the office started buzzing. That morning, it tasted weak, like someone had used the last of the good beans and left me with dust. I stood by the kitchenette window overlooking downtown Seattle, watching fog crawl between buildings. The city was wide awake, but something in me wasn't. I'd come in early, as usual. Old habit. I liked having a quiet hour before the meetings kicked off, to prep, reset, breathe. The Kingswell presentation was scheduled for Friday. It was our biggest account, one I'd nurtured through delays, cultural barriers, and at least 2 near deals that almost died on the table. 6 months of work, hundreds of details, all carefully woven into a final strategy I was planning to review today. But when I logged into the system, my access was gone. At first, I stared at the screen like it had misread my name. Then I tried again. Same result. I checked my permissions, clicked through what I could, and then there it was. An email from IT, auto-generated, no greeting. Per CEO directive, your administrative access to client records has been temporarily reassigned. No explanation, no signature, no context. Temporarily reassigned? I sat back in my chair, blinking. My fingertips hovered over the keyboard, unsure what to do next. Something twisted in my stomach. I reminded myself to breathe. This had to be a mistake. Probably some system migration thing no one told me about. It happens sometimes when they pushed updates. Still, I felt the weight in my chest shift. Not panic, yet, but a kind of quiet dread. The kind that doesn't shout, only hums in your bones. By 9:20 a.m., things got louder. I was scanning email threads for Kingswell documents I knew I'd written. Documents that now showed restricted access. When Rachel, one of the junior analysts, leaned over from the next desk. "You're not heading upstairs?" I looked at her, confused. "Upstairs?" "For the Kingswell strategy briefing," she said. "It started 10 minutes ago. I figured you'd be leading it." Her voice softened near the end, like she wasn't sure whether to keep going. My heart paused. I stood, slowly. From where I sat, I had a direct line of sight to the main stairwell. And right on cue, I watched a group of team leads file past, all headed toward the executive floor, holding folders with my diagrams, my charts, my research. At the end of the group, I saw Todd, the new ops manager, who'd only been at Velour and Crest for 4 months. He was smiling like a man who didn't understand the room he just stepped into, holding my notes. I stepped into the hallway, intercepting Jenna, Serafina's assistant. She was usually polite. Today, she looked like she didn't want to make eye contact. "Is there a reason I wasn't included in that meeting?" Her lips pursed. "The new leadership is shifting direction," she said, then walked off without waiting for a reply. I stared after her, frozen. There it was. New leadership. That meant Serafina. 2 weeks ago, my father officially stepped down and handed the CEO role to his eldest daughter. I should have seen this coming. She and I had never fought outright. Not exactly. But she never forgot that I came from his second marriage, and she came from the first. I was the second family, the shadow that moved in after her mother left. And though we worked under the same roof for years, we'd never been aligned. Still, I thought we had professional respect. Apparently, that's not what she thought. By noon, I sat alone in the break room, with my half-eaten salad wilting in front of me. People walked in and out, speaking in half-quiet tones. No one looked directly at me. No one asked if I was okay. I stared at my phone, tempted to text my father. But what would I even say? "Did you know she's cutting me out? Did you plan this?" Instead, I scrolled. News. Emails. Empty notifications. I thought about the first time I signed the Kingswell account. It had taken 4 months to even get their procurement manager to return my call. And now the entire account was being restructured behind a closed door. Without me. The worst part wasn't being excluded. It was that no one bothered to tell me I was. At 3:45, I went back to my desk. A few of my team members smiled in that awkward, trying not to get involved way. I nodded politely. Then I looked down at my company badge. Still functional, still letting me through the doors, still scanning green in the elevators. But the truth was, I wasn't sure it would tomorrow. The next morning, the office felt colder. Not in temperature, just energy. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the look people gave when they saw me walking in. Like I was a painting that had already been taken down, and no one had figured out where to store it yet. I hung my coat, booted up my computer, and told myself today would be normal. At 8:53 a.m., my inbox pinged. Subject: Kingswell Concern, Internal Process Delay, CC, Entire Senior Management Team, from Strategy and Ops. I clicked it open, my chest already tightening before I read a word. The message outlined an internal delay due to recent misalignment in prior communications led by Ingrid Velour. It mentioned my name twice, casually, but precisely. It stated that I had not provided complete documentation to ensure forward movement. It implied I was the reason Kingswell was hesitating. But that wasn't true. None of it. I scanned the thread again, checking every attachment. There was a version of a client response draft I'd never seen. The numbers weren't mine. The language didn't sound like me, and everyone had already read it. Around me, keyboards clicked and phones rang, business as usual. I sat frozen, blinking at the screen while the blood in my body felt like it was migrating somewhere else. My hands itched, like I needed to punch through the monitor. By 10:15, I was in the archive system, digging through version histories. That document, the fake response, had been saved at 1:12 a.m. under Todd's credentials. Todd, who had joined 4 months ago. Todd, who had walked into the Kingswell meeting with a smile like it was just another Tuesday. I sat back, jaw tight. It wasn't just carelessness. It was planted, and someone made sure it went to everyone before I ever had a chance to speak for myself. I needed answers. So I left my desk quietly and made my way to the marketing floor. Tamsin looked up from her screen when I entered. We'd started at the company around the same time. She used to be on my team before she transferred. We hadn't spoken much lately, but there was still a sliver of something unspoken between us. Something people like Serafina hated. Memory. I didn't even need to ask. Tamsin nodded before I opened my mouth. "They've been splitting up your accounts all week," she said in a low voice. "Serafina signed off on it. It's not just Kingswell. You've basically been carved out." I closed my eyes for a second. "And no one told me." "That was the point," she said. "They wanted it quiet." I left her office feeling like I was carrying someone else's bones inside me. Each step back to my floor felt heavier than the last. By early afternoon, my desk felt like a spotlight in a dark theater, too exposed and yet somehow invisible. I stayed until 6:30, even though I wasn't doing much beyond rereading emails and quietly erasing the draft of a resignation letter I'd typed in my notes app. Later that evening, I found myself parked outside the corner gas station on Rainier Avenue, staring blankly at a green light that had long since turned red again. I wasn't crying, not really. It was just that my eyes burned and my hands wouldn't stop gripping the steering wheel. I thought about last Thanksgiving, eating microwaved stuffing in the office lounge while finalizing the Kingswell proposal. I remembered being on a Zoom call during my cousin's wedding. I remembered the weekend my mother was hospitalized, and I rescheduled the ER visit so I could take a client call. And now a single email with a reply all had rewritten the story. My name was no longer attached to my own work. My face was now the scapegoat for someone else's mess. The shame wasn't from the lie. It was that so many people believed it without hesitation. I turned the key and drove home. Quiet. Mechanical. Tomorrow, I'd find out what else they planned to take away. I didn't sleep much. I remember checking the clock around 2:11 a.m., lying flat in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as if it could spin some kind of answer out of the stale air. The only sound in my apartment was the occasional creak of the building settling into itself, just like I was trying to do. Settle. Breathe. Think. By the time sunlight crept through the blinds, I was already dressed. No makeup, just tinted moisturizer and a braid that felt more like armor than a hairstyle. I walked into the office right before 8 a.m., head high, heart uncertain. I passed through security like a ghost. Badge still worked, but barely anyone looked at me. When I reached my desk, there was already a calendar alert waiting. Subject: Performance Concerns Review. Urgent time: 9 a.m. Location: HR, lower level, conference room 2. I stared at the screen long enough that my monitor went into sleep mode. I showed up to the meeting at 8:59, knocking twice before walking in. 2 people sat at the long rectangular table, Sandra from HR and Brent, our legal liaison. No smiles, no welcome, just quiet protocol. Sandra began reading from a printed form before I even sat down. There have been multiple concerns raised about your recent conduct, Ingrid. Terms like uncooperative, volatile, and resistant to feedback came up repeatedly. I blinked. From who? Brent replied, without looking up from his laptop. Anonymous submissions. We're protecting their identities. Anonymous? My voice cracked slightly, just enough to make me mad at myself. So we're holding a review based on whispers, on unverified input? Sandra kept her tone even. We're not making a final decision. This is just a formal warning. I looked at the paper she slid across the table. My name. A formality. A wound wrapped in corporate formatting. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because I saw it clearly now. This wasn't about collaboration. It was extraction. I signed the document with a pen I nearly snapped in half. By 9:32, I was walking back toward my desk, with a strange calmness pressing against my ribs. Like the body knows what the soul hasn't caught up to yet. My inbox was flooded, but none of it mattered. Not the memo from accounting, not the system update. Only one thing made me pause. There was a single folded letter on my keyboard. I picked it up slowly. Ingrid, I'm sorry. I can't stay in a place that treats you like this. You taught me how to lead, and they're punishing you for it. Nolan. He'd written it by hand, not typed, not emailed. He left it like a quiet apology. I sat down. Nolan had been with me since his internship. I'd pushed to get him hired full-time. I'd walked him through client calls, late edits, even a few tears after his mother passed away. And now, he was gone. The office around me went still. My team avoided my eyes. One of them walked past with a box of binders, mine. Not a single word was said. At lunch, I didn't eat. I just walked the halls. I passed framed photos of company parties. One of them had me, 2 years ago, holding a glass of champagne next to Serafina. We both smiled, but now it looked staged, like actors mid-rehearsal. The hallway smelled like printer toner and recycled air. I used to love the rhythm here, the buzz of minds building something together. Now, it just felt like static. I stopped at the corner window, staring down at the city. People moved fast, cars lined up at red lights, phones to ears, eyes on nothing. This place used to mean something to me. I gave it more hours than I gave my marriage. I missed anniversaries, skipped family holidays. And now they were rewriting my legacy, piece by piece. I whispered aloud, just to myself. I built this place, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. As I turned back toward the hallway, my reflection in the glass stopped me. They thought they could erase me, replace me, fold me up and file me away with a few anonymous notes and one dirty memo. They didn't realize something had shifted. I wasn't the Ingrid they remembered, and I wasn't going to let them finish writing my story for me. Sleep came in fragments, restless and shallow. By the time my alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., I was already sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering over unread emails like they were grenades waiting to go off. That's when I saw it. Forwarded at 3:17 a.m. from Nassim Khalid, Kingswell's lead negotiator. The subject line was calm, but the message underneath carried an undertow of concern. We're unclear on the current direction of the Veller proposal. The new point of contact seems misaligned with our previously discussed terms. Please advise. Nassim, He had CC'd one of Kingswell's senior legal advisors. That wasn't a mistake. It was a move. Strategic. Public, within private channels. My stomach clenched. Vindication and dread tangled in the same breath. I reread it twice, then once more out loud. It was careful, professional. But anyone in our business knew exactly what Nassim was saying. Where is Ingrid, and what the hell is going on? I placed the phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood in my quiet apartment, suddenly aware of every tick of the old wall clock. If Serafina thought removing me would be seamless, she was about to learn otherwise. By the time I arrived at the office, tension hung in the air like humidity before a storm. The receptionist offered a strained smile. I returned it without pause. As I walked past the glass conference rooms, I caught glimpses. People gathered in corners, laptops open, murmuring in clipped tones. I paused near the printer station and overheard it. Just 3 words from someone in legal. "Where's Ingrid now?" It was the first time in weeks I heard my name said, without a whisper or a warning. Inside the operations suite, Serafina paced in front of the projector screen, flanked by Todd and Jenna. Emergency meetings. Likely spinning a new version of the narrative to clean up the one they'd ruined. I didn't enter. I didn't need to. Their expressions were enough. Tight jaws, darting eyes, fingers tapping pens too fast. The wheels were coming loose. Still, no one said anything directly to me. HR still averted their gaze. But a few colleagues, those who once looked past me, now met my eyes when we passed in the hallway. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. I saw something flicker there. Hesitation. Maybe regret. Around 3 p.m., I left the office. No announcement, no explanation. I just walked out, drove east across the bridge, and parked outside the house I hadn't visited in months. My father opened the front door before I could knock, as if he'd been standing behind it all along. "Ingrid," he said, surprised, but not shocked. "Do you have a few minutes?" He stepped aside. "Always." His living room smelled like old leather and the faint citrus cologne he never stopped wearing. The same gray recliner. The same fireplace that had been fake since I was 6. I didn't plan to say much. I couldn't. But I had to let something slip through. Just enough. "I'm not asking for protection," I said. "But if you think everything's running smoothly up there, it's not." He didn't interrupt. He just listened. "They're losing Kingswell," I added quietly, "because they removed the person who built the relationship." He looked down at his hands, those large, strong hands that once taught me how to hold a steering wheel. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "the people we protect need to be tested, and sometimes they fail." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "And what happens when they fail at someone else's expense?" His gaze didn't move, but something in his silence cracked open the air between us. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. But now he couldn't pretend not to. I stood to leave. He didn't stop me. Back in my car, I didn't drive away immediately. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, watching the old house through the windshield like it might vanish if I blinked too long. The war had started. Not with an explosion, but with a question left unanswered. His silence said more than any answer he could have given. By the time I got home that night, the silence in my apartment didn't feel peaceful. It felt loaded. I dropped my bag by the door, pulled off my blazer, and stood in the dark kitchen for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. I didn't bother with dinner. I just poured a glass of water and scrolled through my notifications, half dreading what might be waiting. And there it was. A message from Tamsin, time-stamped just 20 minutes earlier. No subject, just a file. "Thought you should hear this. T." I sat on the couch and hit play. The audio crackled for a second, then steadied. I recognized the space, one of the smaller conference rooms on the second floor, where marketing often huddled. Then came the voice. "Serafina, clear, steady, sharp. We need to remove Ingrid before Friday. No one will risk pushing back if we keep the narrative tight. She's already isolated. Just finish it." I paused it, sat in silence. Then, hit play again. This time, I didn't flinch. Her words didn't hurt as much as her tone did. Cold. Clinical. Like I was a stain she'd been meaning to scrub out for years. She didn't just want control, she wanted the story. I set the phone down gently, but my hands shook, not from fear, from the final clarity. She had made it personal. So would I. The next morning, I walked into the office with something different in my stride. Not anger, not revenge, intention. I kept to my routine, brewed my coffee, replied to emails, said nothing. At 2 p.m., Margot Dell, one of the senior board members, appeared outside my office door. She didn't knock. She just raised an eyebrow like she was deciding whether or not to walk in. I nodded once. That was all she needed. She closed the door behind her. "I'm not here on anyone's behalf," she said first. "Let's just get that straight." I leaned back slightly, unsure where this was going. "I've watched this place bend for Serafina," she continued, "but not break. Yet." I didn't interrupt. I didn't trust myself to speak. Margot crossed her arms. "If you choose to fight, I won't stop you. The board is paying closer attention than you think. But attention doesn't mean support, not without something concrete." I exhaled, steady. "I don't need everyone to back me. Just enough people not to look away." Margot gave the faintest hint of a smile. "That's the first smart thing I've heard in weeks." She didn't say she was on my side. She didn't need to. After she left, I sat alone at my desk. The clock read 4:12. Outside the window, Seattle's sky was beginning to bruise with early winter dusk. I opened my email, typed my father's name into the to field, then stared at the blinking cursor. I started writing. "You gave her the company, but you gave me something else. You taught me to never walk away from truth." Then I deleted it, rewrote it, deleted it again. Eventually, I left it saved in drafts. No subject line, no signature, just a truth I wasn't quite ready to release. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, hands gripping the counter. The face staring back at me didn't look defeated. It looked awake. I wasn't waiting for the next attack. I wasn't waiting for permission, or justice, or even fairness. I was done waiting to be invited back into the room. The next morning, I didn't bother choosing my outfit carefully. I wore black. Not as a symbol, just practicality. It hid fury better than beige ever could. I walked into the building at 8:52 a.m., coffee in hand, and headed straight to my desk. But before I could sit, my phone buzzed. "Come to Serafina's office, now. Jenna." No subject line, no punctuation beyond the period. No need to guess. I tossed my bag under my chair and made my way upstairs. The glass doors to the executive floor stood open, framing Serafina like she was posing for a magazine cover. She was sitting with one leg crossed over the other, posture perfect, a folder neatly closed in front of her. "Ingrid," she said without looking up, "have a seat." I didn't. "This isn't personal," she started, in that soft, detached way people use when they're about to gut you with a smile. "But you're no longer aligned with the direction we're taking. Your position is being dissolved, effective immediately." No HR rep, no security escort, just her. I stared at her for a long beat, not blinking. Then I took one step forward, voice calm but crystal clear. "You just made your biggest mistake." She didn't flinch, but I saw it, the slightest twitch in her cheek. Then I turned around and walked out. No folder in hand, no speech, no collapse. By the time I got to the elevator, my pulse was steady. I didn't go home, not yet. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to the coffee shop near Pike Street, grabbed a booth in the corner, and opened my phone. First, I sent a message to Jude, the internal auditor. "You'll want to hear this." Then I attached the audio file of Serafina's meeting. Next, I texted Margot. "I'm ready." She replied with just one period. Back at my apartment that afternoon, I opened my notebook, the one I hadn't touched since my first year at the company. Inside were pages of notes I'd once used to train new hires, sketch strategies, map out recovery plans after failed quarters. Now, I turned to a blank page and wrote at the top, Timeline, Serafina's internal strategy shift. Beneath it, I started listing. May 12th. Client assignments quietly reshuffled June 3rd. Budget reallocation away from client services. July 10th. First memo referencing collaboration concerns. Every dot connected. Every move now had context. The hunt had begun. Word spread fast. By 5 p.m., 3 different coworkers had texted me. Short, coded things like, thinking of you, or that was low, even for her. I didn't respond. Not yet. At 6:17 p.m., I got the email that sealed it. From Nassim Khalid. To Edric Veller. Subject, Kingswell engagement status. Urgent. Due to significant shifts in communication and team structure, Kingswell is placing all further action on hold until Ingrid Veller is reinstated in her previous capacity. Our confidence in the original partnership terms is tied directly to her leadership and presence. We await your clarification. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Margot without a word. Serafina thought she'd taken the crown, but what she grabbed instead was a lit fuse. She may have won a battle, but she just stepped into a war. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't try to. I didn't need rest. I needed clarity. And clarity came at 7:42 a.m. in the form of a message from Margot. Boardroom, 10 o'clock. You're on the invite. No other details. Just that. I got dressed in silence, tied my hair back tighter than usual, and left the apartment without finishing my coffee. By 9:55, I was seated at the far end of the glass-walled conference room on the top floor. The board table gleamed like it had something to prove. Every chair was filled. Margot sat beside Edric, her arms crossed. Jude stood at the head of the table, a remote in one hand. The lights dimmed slightly. We've concluded our digital audit, Jude began, clicking the first slide. What followed was a ruthless, methodical breakdown. Logan timestamps, IP addresses, file access logs, email headers, dozens of them. Every one of the sabotage instances, from altered spreadsheets to manipulated emails, could be traced back to a shared workstation. That workstation belonged to Serafina's executive assistant. Multiple entries, Jude continued, over the course of 5 weeks. He clicked again. The timeline glowed behind him. At first, the room was quiet. Then someone whispered near the end of the table. This wasn't a misstep. It was an operation. Gasps followed. Jude didn't flinch. He clicked again. An email forwarded from an internal printer queue. A draft resignation letter, unsigned, with a file name matching Nolan's final note, except this version listed Ingrid as the one who had pressured him to leave. False, planted. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the evidence speak for me. Then Jude stepped aside, and Margot stood. There's one more thing, she said. A woman entered. She looked to be in her 60s, calm but alert. Her name tag read D. Ramsey. My father's old assistant, I murmured to myself. She held a sealed manila folder. We kept this archived, she said, placing it in front of Margot. I was instructed never to share it, unless the company's integrity came under threat. The room held its breath. Inside was a contract review from years ago. A European investment deal Serafina had spearheaded and tanked. The report showed 7-figure losses due to premature disclosures, missed legal compliance, and internal misrepresentation. I remembered whispers, but this was confirmation. Edric's jaw tightened. He leaned forward slowly, elbows on the table, eyes closed, like the memory itself hurt. She told me she learned from it, he muttered. Margot's voice sliced the air. She didn't. Serafina stood in the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable. I made mistakes, she said, stepping into the room. But so has everyone here. No one else tried to erase a co-founder to cover their own, Margot shot back. Serafina opened her mouth again, but Margot cut her off. You had your turn. A beat of silence. Then another board member said what everyone was thinking. She can't stay. Every eye turned to Edric. He stood up. Slowly, like every step cost him. He looked at me. I gave her the company, he said. But I gave you the truth. You knew how to carry it? A few seats shifted. Someone cleared their throat, uncomfortable. Serafina didn't blink. She looked at me, not like a sister, not like a rival, like a stranger trying to decode the aftermath of her own storm. As Margot nodded toward security, Serafina's lips curled into something between a smirk and a threat. She passed behind my chair, pausing just long enough to say, "This isn't over." And then she was gone. I watched the elevator doors close behind her, her reflection shrinking to nothing in the polished steel. Nobody spoke for a long while. The boardroom cleared slowly. Chairs scraped back. Papers were gathered in silence. Margot gave me a single nod and slipped out. Edric didn't move. He stayed at the end of the table, hands flat on the surface, eyes staring into the wood grain as if it held answers. After the last person left, he finally looked at me. "Office," he said quietly. "Please." The walk down the hallway was quieter than it had ever been. In his office, he didn't sit right away. He stood by the window, his back to me, shoulders stiff. "I thought time would fix her," he said finally. "I thought I was buying her time to grow into it." I leaned against the edge of his desk. "You gave her the keys, but she crashed the car. That's not on you, that's on her." He turned slowly. His eyes looked older than they had the day before. "I thought you were the one who didn't want the weight." "I never wanted the crown," I said, "but I was willing to carry the cost." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, quietly, he reached into the top drawer and pulled out a folder. "I should have done this weeks ago." He slid it across the desk. Inside, a new contract. Clear. Director, permanent. Executive Director, Client Strategy and Culture, a role above Serafina's. Reporting to the board. I signed it without looking up. By early afternoon, an all-hands emergency meeting was called. No one knew what to expect. The auditorium buzzed with confusion and speculation. The last time a meeting like this had been held was during a company-wide layoff years ago. Edric stood at the podium. "I want to address what's happened, and what will not happen again," he began. His voice was steady, though heavy. "Effective immediately, Serafina Velor is suspended pending final review. Ingrid Velor will oversee the Kingswell transition and lead cultural restructuring." A rustle of whispers swept the room. Some faces stiffened, others softened. I stepped up beside him. "I didn't come back to reclaim a title," I said. "I came back because this company deserves better than silence and sabotage." The words weren't rehearsed. They didn't need to be. The applause started slowly, uncertain, cautious. Then it built, solid, earnest. I nodded, once, then stepped back. We didn't take questions. We didn't need to. Later that evening, I returned to my office. The same chair, the same desk. But nothing felt the same. As I was packing a few things into drawers, I found something unexpected. A small envelope, no name on the outside. Inside, on unlined paper, in handwriting I knew as well as my own, were 4 words. "This should have been mine." No punctuation, no explanation, just that. I folded the note, placed it in a folder, and locked it in the drawer. Then I whispered, barely audible, "Maybe," but I earned it. I sat down, not as the girl who once waited for credit, or the woman they underestimated, but as someone who finally knew her worth. Some endings aren't victories, they're releases. The next morning, I walked through the lobby of Velor and Company just like I always had. Only now, the air felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just clearer. There was no announcement, no grand re-entry. Just a quiet return to a desk that wasn't about prestige, but purpose. The first thing I did was reinstate the ethics reporting line that had quietly disappeared under Serafina's restructuring. It wasn't flashy, but it was necessary. Then I made a list of former team members who had left, not by choice, but by force. Some had already moved on, others returned my call. A few rejoined quietly, no press, no fanfare. It wasn't about undoing the damage. It was about starting again, one brick at a time. Margot and I reworked the leadership flowchart. Edric handed off more than I expected, maybe more than he wanted. But he didn't push back. Trust was something we were both learning to earn again. I didn't try to be approachable. I didn't try to be liked. But the whispers in the halls faded. Eyes met mine again, not out of fear, but out of respect. Some days, I stayed late just to walk the floors alone, to hear the hum of the place as it started to breathe again. That weekend, I sat in my apartment, feet tucked under me on the couch, reading over notes for the Kingswell renewal. It had been a full week since Serafina walked out. No press release, no public fallout, just silence. Rumors buzzed, of course. She moved to Florida. No, I heard she's in Michigan, starting over, somewhere quiet. Edric never brought her up again. Not at work, not at home. That Sunday afternoon, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Her number was still there, buried under an old nickname I hadn't used in years. I stared at it. I didn't know what I expected. I let it ring 4 times. Then I hung up. I didn't leave a message. Because some wounds don't need closure. They need distance. A few days later, I caught my reflection in the mirror of the 3rd-floor restroom, the same one I used to hide in when the politics of the office felt too heavy. I looked at myself. I didn't see the woman who'd cried in that stall 2 years ago after Serafina had shut down her proposal in front of a full boardroom. I didn't see the sister who had once begged for inclusion. I saw someone else now. Someone who no longer needed to be explained or defended. Someone who knew she didn't rise because someone gave her permission. I reached into my blazer pocket and found a folded index card, a line I'd scribbled months ago during one of those long, uncertain nights. I'd written it without knowing why. Now I did. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing to stop bleeding. I whispered it once, let it land. Then I walked out of the restroom and back into the office, not with a vengeance, not with regret, but with the full weight of who I'd become. There were no apologies, no redo. Just a choice to stop bleeding and start living. And if you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Maybe you've been in my shoes. Maybe not. But if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or made to feel small in a space you helped build, then you already understand the quiet strength it takes not to shatter. Here's what I learned. Silence doesn't protect you. Loyalty should never come at the cost of your dignity. And sometimes walking back into the room is not about reclaiming power. It's about redefining it. I used to believe that keeping the peace meant staying quiet. Now I know. Peace built on silence is just fear with a smile. So, if you're standing at your own crossroads right now, maybe in your job, your family, or your own sense of worth, ask yourself, what story are you letting someone else write for you? And are you ready to pick up the pen? I'd love to know, has there been a moment in your life when you finally said, enough, I deserve better? Drop a comment below with A or just type 1 if this story hit home for you. Or tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you didn't connect with this video, I still want to hear from you. Tell me why. What did or didn't sit right? What's your story? Let's turn this comment section into a space of shared truth, not just opinions. And hey, if stories like this remind you of your own strength, your voice, your second chances, then hit that subscribe button, because I have more to share. This is Ingrid, and I may not be who I was when this began, but maybe, just maybe, neither are you.